Welcome. You're listening to Literacy Now, the official podcast for the nonprofit organization Parents for Reading Justice, and I am your host, Brett Tingley.
Reading matters. How we teach it matters even more. Without equitable learning opportunities, students get left behind, left without the ability to advance their skills and unlock their potential. It shouldn't be that way. IMSI exists to change that, and we won't rest until we do. With decades of experience rooted in the science of reading, IMSI has long been the educator's most trusted ally. We refine the best of structured literacy and Orton Gillingham to equip educators with the knowledge, tools, and support they need to make a difference in the classroom for every student at every age and every stage. Literacy success is possible through superior training, tools, and support. Learn it better, teach it better, until every person reads. IMSI.
Today we are so excited to have Missy Purcell with us. She is a powerhouse in Georgia. Her initial coming onto the stage was through being a balanced literacy teacher who found structured literacy after having a dyslexic son. And so I couldn't be more excited to talk to you, because to have a teacher who's gone through that transformation and had such a personal tie to that transformation is incredible. So can you talk to us about your why? Like, how did this happen?
Yeah, so I was a fifth grade teacher for close to a decade. And I went to the University of Georgia, and my entire teaching experience, training, and everything was all around balanced literacy. I didn't know that term at that point, but the people that I was exposed to in college were Lucy Calkins. I'm a little bit older, so at that point, she only had the Art of Teaching Writing book out as a guide for us as educators. But we very much learned the workshop approach to teaching literacy. And my first job that I got was in my hometown, which is in Gwinnett County. And I started my job, and one of the very first PDs that I received was Fontes and Pinnell's Guided Reading. That was the first book I was handed, and we were going to do a year-long study of guided reading with Fontes and Pinnell. I did not know them until I entered that PD, but it was a year-long study, which led me through a series of group discussions, but also getting to visit other teachers in our county that were already employing some of these methods. And knowing that I had already learned these theories in college, seeing some of the teachers in my county doing this, I remember going to see one teacher in particular, and I thought, oh, this is how you do it. And think about that. I went to see a teacher for an hour, and I said, this is how you do it, combined with my knowledge of what I had read in the book. And I came back and I collected at that point we had anthologies. I collected everything. I created my reading corner. I made, I had all my chart paper, my mini lessons. I mean, I just dove in to it just completely. And I was good at it. I mean, quite honestly, when I believe in something and I get the training, or I get the nod to do it, I just jumped in. I became really good at it. In fact, I was the observational classroom for my school. My school was actually part of something called Literacy Collaborative. Mm-hmm. So my fifth grade classroom was an observational classroom. So teachers would come from all around, not just our county. But one really cool story, or I don't know if it's cool now, but my second grade teacher came with a cohort from a county that I grew up in to observe me teaching. And then as a result of that observation, I was invited back that summer to lead a week-long training on how to get all the teachers in my former town to how to set up reading and writing workshops. So not only did I teach it, but I was training teachers to do it. I could convince any parent every year that all they needed to do was read more with their kids, and that this was the letter their kid was, and this is what they needed to do. Just read. And I remember even open houses telling parents, and here kids are going to love to learn to read and write. this room, as you look around, is structured for them to be engaged with literature and text and language all the time, and you can just feel the atmosphere. The atmosphere is one of joy and love. I mean, I was just reading from a script basically that was ingrained in my head at this point. And so, yeah, that is my history, and I did that for 10 years. Just completely committed. I even left teaching for a little bit to have kids and came back for a year and jumped right back in because nothing had changed in my district. I had been out for several years, came back in, and it was like I just picked back up and continued doing what I had done. There were now some new resources, like LLI was on the scene now, which was a new resource under the F&P guidelines, and Lucy now had jumped more into the reading bandwagon, and so we had a lot more resources at our hand, but same script, exact same script.
At the time when you were, you drank the Kool-Aid, you were all in, were there children that struggled to read?
Oh, yes. In fact, I had a principal. She was new to the school, and I really liked her. She was just such a great supportive teacher, a principal. And I went to her one day, and I said, we've got to do something because I have kids in my room, and we're doing book clubs, and we're doing, guided reading, but I'm giving them a second grade text or a first grade text that's not on grade level. But then they're doing well on that because I've reduced the cognitive load for them so they can understand text. But then they're making an A, and then I'm putting an A in the grade book. But they're not on grade level. And it always bothered me. I said to her, I don't know what's going on. I feel like this is terrible advice, but I remember even playing with the idea of shouldn't their reading level somehow influence part of their grade? I mean, this is, not sage advice over here, but it was my struggle with I'm not communicating to the next teacher or the next person this kid's going to get help from that there's a problem and that the kid needs help. I was always frustrated too. I would have kids who the focus was always on comprehension. So they're not comprehending. I didn't know why they weren't comprehending because I had never been taught why they weren't comprehending. And so I would go to her and say, what's going on in the early grades? Like, what are we doing? What are we missing the mark on? Because I'm getting kids in the fifth grade, and I also taught fourth at one point, but fourth and fifth grade that are not able to read the words on the page. At that point, I did not even know the word decoding. Get that. I'm an elementary language arts teacher. I had an emphasis in language arts and social studies, so I had extra classes in those two areas, and I did not know the word decoding. So that to me was, I was frustrated. I would have kids come in below grade level, and they would leave below grade level, and I wondered, what happened to them, or how do they fare when they went to middle school? And I was unable, we have pretty strict rules. We're not able to really ever hold kids back. And not that I think that that's the solution. I'm certainly not one of those people, but it's more just like I felt helpless. I felt like I couldn't do anything, and I wasn't doing anything. But I had a loving, happy, literacy-filled environment. But the same kids that needed me to get it right at the beginning of the year were still struggling at the end of the year. And the kids that could read, of course, it was kind of fun for them, right? I mean, they were just getting to read all the time. No one's kind of holding them super accountable. I look back and think I kind of failed them too, because in the reading and writing workshop model, you don't always really know. There's so much autonomy. There's so much, everyone's kind of reading their own book. They're in a bunch of book clubs. Everybody's writing their own type of writing. And I would feel helpless sometimes as a teacher because when I would go to have conferences, that's a big part of that approach. I would have conferences with kids, and I would realize all the skills they didn't have. And there's no way I could fix it all in a 10-minute reading and writing conference, right there with the kids on the spot. So it was very, very frustrating.
One of the things that you said that, and I want to get into you being a parent. It's like the cancer doctor who gets cancer. All of a sudden you see it from the other side. But when you said that you felt bad because you weren't the kid was not really getting a grade that was reflective of being an A. You know, they can't read on grade level, so it doesn't seem right that they would get an A. But you were worried that the teachers that you were passing these kids on to would not really have a full feeling of what they're doing. And I'm sitting here thinking, there's a Hechinger report that talks about how parents have no idea that their kids are not doing well because they look at the A and they say, and they even look at a B because, you know, B's passing. Now, C, you're going to start worrying, but a B or an A, my kid's doing okay.
Yep.
The parents are not even aware of what's going on.
No. Parents certainly weren't in the classrooms I taught because I was communicating A's, your kid's doing well, or B's. Same for me, though, as a parent. When my kid was in school, he was making all A's, or at that point, I guess it's lower elementary, so he was making E's and S's. There were no N's or U's. Even though there were tons of papers to indicate there should be N's and U's, the grades in the grade book didn't reflect that. So it was very misleading.
So let's talk about, so you were just humming along. You had and when you said a loving classroom, it used to drive me crazy because they would start everything and say, we love your child, love, love, love. And I got to the point, you know, after, and I'd say, I know we all love my child, love them, but it doesn't help. We have to teach them to read. That's where we're going. So can you talk to us about like your why, like how you got into this? Like what happened in your family?
Yeah. So I have 3 children. My oldest was kind of like, if you know Nancy Young's ladder of reading, I always kind of group my kids by that ladder because I have one in each section. My top kid, my oldest, is the top of the ladder. He just learned to read almost by osmosis. We know that's not true, but he picked it up really quickly. He got the code quickly, and he was just flying through. He was reading Harry Potter in kindergarten. So this kid is just, I know, right, I know. So part of me thought, wow, I'm such a good parent. I know, yay, look at me. You know, I was like, look at my kid. You know how we all are as parents. You're just so proud. It's your first kid. You don't know any better. So you just think, my second kid struggled a little bit. Quite honestly, he didn't quite catch it as quickly. In fact, you know, Harrison, I mentioned, was reading right at the beginning of the kindergarten year. And my middle child he didn't start reading really well until 1st grade. It took him longer. We should probably explore that later, but because now I know more. But it took him longer, and he struggled a little bit with writing as well. But what I noticed about that kid is if I sat him down and spoke directly to him and showed him directly what to do, taught him one-on-one, taught him the sounds, taught him how to write, all the pieces of literacy, he could do it. Somehow there was a disconnect in the classroom. Whatever he was hearing in the classroom wasn't registering with him, but he was able to do it. So he didn't have a learning disability because if you taught him, you know, he could do it. This has been so true about everything in his life. But my youngest started struggling with there were some red flags with him, even in preschool. You know, he struggled. He had a great oral vocabulary, because we exposed him to tons of language and experiences and reading. My house is filled top to bottom with books. And so he was great. And he moves his hand like this when he talks, like a little politician. So he was talking and telling people things, and he actually could memorize things, oddly enough, really well. But that was what was so weird. When he got to school, he struggled so much with print, with the written word, the written letters, and I was told in kindergarten, he has a summer birthday, don't worry. And I did push back. I was kind of proud of myself. When I started going down this journey, I started looking at my emails, and I noticed, like, I had made a comment, well, you know, it's funny that you say he's got a summer birthday because it doesn't really impact his math. His math is right on par. He's really like getting the math, and he's really, 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 you know, advancing there. He's memorizing things, but when it comes to him knowing his sounds, he knew one sound when he left preschool, and he only added about 2 or 3 more in kindergarten. And they had him, he wasn't even registering, if we're going to use the F&P levels, but he wasn't even registering on a level. He was the star, the asterisk, which is you can't even read level A. So
Yeah.
So my why over time became this awakening in me when I realized what was going on with Matthew was very likely what was going on with the students that I had questions about. There was like this colliding of my two worlds, the teacher Missy and the Mama Missy. I now was like, I understand why those kids were struggling. They were struggling, probably some of them might have been like William, where my middle child, where they just kind of needed more direct instruction. And then some of them were struggling because they were like Matthew, because they needed a more intensive version of instruction and a very direct level of instruction that I was not even aware of, much less able to identify or to get them the help. So my struggle initially was to help Matthew. My why initially was to help Matthew. But eventually, once I got Matthew the help he needed, there was something in me that just needed to try to fix a wrong. Even though it was an innocent wrong, it was a wrong. And I thought, I can't go back and fix it for those kids that I inadvertently, unknowingly, I guess, failed. But I maybe can change a system that's continuing to fail the kids that are coming behind. So that's my why. That's why I started this. I always say I went back to the proverbial burning building because there are still so many kids in the buildings and teachers. Part of my why too is teachers. I'm a teacher at heart, even though I'm not currently practicing. I am a teacher, always a teacher, and I want teachers to know that you can have this awakening as well. You can see this, you can learn this. And this is something that I feel like, had I known how to do this, man, if I had put the passion behind what I did with balanced literacy into this, I would have been a rock star. I might have had one of those cool Instagram pages with all those cool teachers that have all the, I don't know if I had the technology skills for that, but I think I would have literally just given it my all, and I would have been devoted to changing it for kids.
Well, I think I admire, and this is one of the best things. Best thing is to help kids learn to read, but right up there after that is meeting extraordinary people who, after they get their own child, their own family, their own house is not burning, they continue to go out and to help. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just I think it's so awesome. So we thank you for, and you're doing amazing things in Georgia, but I just think I applaud you for not just getting your son fixed and then, taking up golf or something.
Yeah, not that.
Let me ask a thing. I think I've read some material, or I've listened to some podcasts that you were on, but your son received reading recovery. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, because that's out of the Ohio State University, and I'm based in Columbus, Ohio. So I have our kids faced that. What was your experience from a kind of a parent perspective?
It's interesting. When I was getting when I was a brand new teacher, I got to go observe a reading recovery teacher because I was actually contemplating going to get certified to become a certified reading recovery specialist. And I ended up not doing that. That must have been some little divine intervention ahead of my time. That would have been a bigger mark of shame in my story. But with Matthew, like I mentioned earlier, he in kindergarten was, an asterisk on the reading levels. So he qualified for reading recovery. I don't really know why. I really can't tell you why he qualified. I have a sinking suspicion. This was the school I taught at. Some of these are my former colleagues. And I might say that he was chosen because I was a friend, and they thought they might have been trying to help my child. And so, that there was the intention there was to do something to help Matthew. But there was a lot of ignorance about what was going on with Matthew. And I think what bothers me so much about reading recovery in our case is that they do give kids a survey at the beginning, but there was nothing on that survey that tipped anyone off that there was something bigger going on with my kid. So they threw him into this intervention, which was one-on-one, intervention with the reading recovery specialist. She's a lovely lady, very sweet, very kind. I got lots of reports about how much she loved Matthew. But about halfway through it was actually just a couple months in. I guess maybe I had to go back and look at the date, but I got an email from her. He was on level 10 or 11, and she said he had been moving along nicely up until now, but she had recently noticed that he was not really wanting to try, and seemed a little not motivated, and that now that the text had gotten harder, he wasn't, really attempting to continue to read the books. And she asked me to continue to work with him at home, to continue read with him at home, because that was going to make everything better. And I also got a letter at the beginning of the program telling me that he would be bringing books home every night, and that if he didn't know a word, that he could guess the word. So I have copies of these letters and these emails, and I look back. So at that time, I still didn't know Matthew had dyslexia. So I was like, oh, is he just not trying? I can't, my little boys are such good little boys, mostly, at least in public they are. So, I was like, what's going on? Like, why is he not, giving it his all? But then part of me was also like, okay, it's not working. And your advice to me is we're going to keep trucking on, and we just want you to keep reading to him. That was when I sent an email and I requested an SST. And I was told that I should just wait because he was in reading recovery, and that reading recovery, and I quote, I have an email that says this was the most comprehensive reading intervention that they had available, and that we should just let him finish it. So we know it's not working. We have an email verifying it's not. We're just going to keep going. And they did. I call it 20 wasted weeks because he had 20 wasted weeks of instruction. And then when he was exited, nobody did anything. He was exited, he failed the program, and he was just exited. I had to call the SST meeting. I had to beg for the next step for testing. I wanted him to be evaluated, and he should have been evaluated before this intervention. That's what I would tell all the mamas out there who are in schools right now. If you suspect something, go for the psychological evaluation. No survey, no screener is going to give you what you need. Those are great for people who are unaware that there might be a problem, but if you already know, you don't need to have a screener. Federal law gives you the right to request a full evaluation. So you don't have to wait for the school to exhaust all their extra things they want to do. You can do that. If I could go back, I would tell myself that. I would get him screened in kindergarten, and then we would have avoided reading recovery because it was a waste. It also added to his anxiety. I started at that point in first grade. I started getting phone calls that he was sick. He had a stomach ache. He had a headache. He was, not feeling well, had a fever, whatever. I mean, and for a few times I fell for it and went to pick him up, and then he'd come home and be like, where are we going? I was like, home, you're sick. And he was like, I'm not sick. And I was like, well, that's what you told the school, so from now on, I'm going to need to see proof that you're sick. But what he was doing was, ironically, I figured it out. He was avoiding reading groups and writing groups. He was wanting to be checked out every time it was time to do reading and writing. So he was starting to have these symptoms at school. Then he started getting in trouble because when he couldn't check out for sick, he started messing around with people. He was kicking people or flicking people, just being, he also has ADD. So he's, just being a first grade boy, basically, in a group setting where he wasn't being successful. So he was responding to not having the right supports in the instruction. And they saw it as a behavior. What it really was a 7-year-old little child saying, I need help, but I don't know how to tell you I need help because I don't really know what's wrong. I just know I'm not getting it like everyone else. And they didn't see that. They just saw the behavior. So after that happened a few times, I remember calling the principal and I just said, this is not who we are. Our kids know how to behave. They know there's consequences. And I'm just really worried that people are starting to see him as a behavior and not as a kid. And there's something going on. And I need us to fix that. I need us to find out what that is and us to get a good plan to fix that. So we did at that point have him evaluated and we discovered, although of course we weren't really fully evaluated and ready to go until February of second grade. So, it takes a minute to kind of get everybody to do the right thing. So it took a minute, and so he got evaluated. And this is what you'll find crazy, though. So he gets evaluated, and they won't say dyslexia, but characteristics of dyslexia. And classic dyslexic in every sense of the way. And what I now know is they did a pretty skimpy evaluation, but it was enough for us to find that part out. They missed his dysgraphia, and they also missed a language processing disability, which would hinder his intervention in the years to come, because we have to really know everything about a kid so we can holistically remediate them. It can't just be a punch card of I got this one thing and I'm going to fix this one thing. But when he was in second grade, he finally got evaluated and placed into a special program. Guess what they were using? So great, LLI. And I remember at this point I was already starting to learn more. I had already joined a couple groups on Facebook, and I was educating myself. I was attending webinars left and right. I was ordering books. I was finding people. This is actually when I met a wonderful group of ladies here in Georgia that were part of Decoding Dyslexia Georgia. And some of them had walked for, years before me. So they were like my North Stars. I bought books that I couldn't comprehend. That was like, I was in college, learning to how the brain learns to read. And so I start asking questions, is this a program for kids with dyslexia? Oh, yes, it is. I was also paying for outside tutoring, and I was saying, well, his tutor uses something called Orton Gillingham, and she says that he needs to learn sounds and attach those to the letters, and she's teaching him to blend and segment and then decode the words, word by word. And I said, but that's not what's happening in your class. Oh yeah, we don't teach kids to do that here. I mean, I have this all in emails. and I thought, it's like we just left reading recovery. Now we just jumped into its really terrible cousin, which they really are cousins, because there's a little bit of I think the board member, Fontes Vanel sits on the reading recovery board. Yeah, there's a little connection there, right?
We brought it. Gay Sue Pinnell brought it from New Zealand to the United States, and here at Ohio State University, we have the North American headquarters. Thank you,
lovely. Well, we do have a college here in Georgia State, that is our headquarters for training all the reading recovery teachers. Yeah, it's pretty strong here too. They have a nice little stronghold here, and we were the unlucky recipients of the legacy of that, and then the continued legacy of LLI. It's really terrible when you've got these programs that are all really intricately connected, and it's the same method that doesn't work. And so it doesn't work the first time in a one-on-one setting. So now let's try it in a group setting, basically the same method of instruction, and see if it works now in a group setting. My phrase this week is make it make sense. Just make it make sense, because it doesn't make sense. If you could even step back, even if you're not aware of what's wrong, even just knowing it didn't work with one-on-one, why are we doing it in a group setting now? It doesn't matter if it has a new name. It's LLI. It's literally balanced literacy. It's not teaching kids the code in a systematic way that they can be consistently, proficient over time, where they can apply skills over time, not just memorize words over time. And so, I call his journey the road to reading failure, because it really was just one failure after another, to no fault of his own or even ours. Even as I became more and more knowledgeable, the school became less and less, transparent. The county became less transparent. The harder my questions got, the more vague their answers got. And so it really became very frustrating. And I advocated for him hard from first grade all the way to fourth grade, when the pandemic hit in third grade. But in fourth grade, I had 18 IEP meetings. team.
I've never heard that many.
Some of those were continuations, like it was like one meeting that lasted 3 days, but still, that's the number of days that we set in 2+ hours of meetings to try to get them to have a compliant IEP and to give him a reading intervention that actually was meeting his needs. Because I discovered, even once our school did pilot Wilson, but I discovered that our teachers weren't trained more than 3 days of training, so they weren't certified. I also discovered that they were using LLI as the comprehension part because the Wilson part didn't address the comprehension. So he was still getting balanced literacy. I have an email where I should have been a lawyer because I pleaded the case for how that was so. I could probably take all of my emails and put them in a book, and someone could make it nice and fancy, and it would just be this like guidebook on how to like shred it. Because I did, because I just knew I was right, and my parents always said when I was little I was either going to be a preacher or a lawyer. And I chose to be a teacher, but I think I have the skill set for both. But I ended up I wrote epistles where I just compared and contrasted. I used my good writing skills, and I offered solutions, and I offered to connect them to free training and groups to come in. I was doing everything I could in a nice way to advocate in a non-adversarial way, but that didn't work. It really didn't work. I had to eventually, I filed due process. I exercised my parental rights under IDA, and Matthew was afforded the right to read in a private school. And it shouldn't have to be that way. A, that's not cost effective. B, he was allowed to fail for 5 years before we got him that, which allowed him to, what's the word I'm looking for? Pick up. Yeah, we added new diagnoses because of the failure, which was unfair to him. And I know the child that he was when he was little. This kid is brave and fearless and silly and funny. He's tenacious. I joke that he's kind of a mini version of me. That hand thing, he does that. Yeah. He's very sure of himself, and when he believes in something, he can advocate for it. He's a little me. He's a little unfiltered. It's kind of not pretty sometimes, but it's, but for a minute, they tried to snuff that out of him because he was so lost in a world of overwhelm and frustration and failure, not by any of his own doing, but because of a system that was more married to the program they loved and the method they loved than they were to listening and understanding the plight of a kid. That's what I will never understand, is that even if you love balanced literacy, I'm thinking about me, if I was a teacher in that situation, if I had been one of Matthew's teachers, I would have listened to a parent. I wasn't that blinded. I would have at least been like, okay, you've got something to say. You're the parent of this child. I didn't get that. It was very much they were protecting the product and the methodology. And this is what we use, and this is why it works. And I kept saying it's not working. We have data that says it's not working. And they just continued to let him fail year after year after year. Even with, I call it the Band-Aid approach, the side dose of phonics that came through a very poorly implemented version of Wilson, to no fault of that teacher. That teacher, she's amazing. The school failed her. They didn't give her the training that she needed to be successful. I will say on a side note, she has gone on to get her dyslexia certification. Talk about going back to the burning building. She was so inspired by Matthew's journey, I'll cry, that she went and got her certification, and now she helps kids, and she helps them really well. So that is an amazing teacher, and that is someone who knows that it's not about the methodology, it's about what works for this kid, and what does research tell us about how kids learn to read, and how can I learn about that, and how can I do better? That phrase, know better, do better. She is the living, breathing definition of that.
Parents for Reading Justice is a nonprofit grassroots movement dedicated to ensuring every child learns to read by engaging parents and educators in adopting the science of reading. Please watch our award-winning film, Our Dyslexic Children, take our masterclass, and to ensure all our services remain free of charge, please consider making a donation today, all at parentsforreadingjustice.org.
But it's especially troubling to me that because from the outside as a parent, when you find all this stuff and you've been reading about it on the internet and you go in and you share this with your school administration, Todd Collins, a friend of mine in Palo Alto, says they call parents meddling idiots because we come in and we have all these ideas, but they think, they don't know what they're talking about. We're the experts. But as a teacher as a teacher yourself, you'd think that you would have the secret code words to help them understand. But for them to push you off, just like they did us, that is very disappointing, even more so.
Yeah, at one point they even acted like they wanted to learn. And they were like, I said, well, can I send you research articles? Can I send you books to read and webinars? Oh, yes, send them. They wouldn't read them. It was like a way to pacify me. And I was called litigious almost from the beginning. The minute I started asking questions, this is so funny. The minute I knew my rights, like the minute I actually read the booklet they give you, the booklet you get every time you go for an IEP meeting, the one that in the beginning you're like, this is overwhelming. I don't know what to do with this. Well, I had like 10 of those books, right? Because they give you one every time. So I go in, I start reading it, and then I start researching it. I'm like, oh, I have some rights. So I start exercising my rights. And it was almost as if it was, I was bad because I was exercising my legal rights. I had friends who worked in the school who knew me, and literally they heard the things that were being said about me, litigious and, oh, bless her heart, she thinks that her kid can do more than he can, or I don't know why she's advocating for Wilson. It's such a boring program. That one, I thought the ignorance. I don't really care if it's fun. And quite honestly, boredom should not be our radar for what we do in a classroom. Some things just aren't going to be fun. But I also think a good teacher can take anything and make it engaging because they build rapport with kids. And what I think kids need is a teacher that knows what your kid needs and builds a relationship that's safe and open and transparent and that's actually beneficial to the child. The child will be engaged when they know that you're helping them. The child will disengage and be bored when what you're giving them is unhelpful or helping them become successful in your classroom. So we've got to stop looking at children as behaviors and problems in those kids and start going, what am I not doing in my classroom to engage that kid in a way that they can become a proficient reader or writer or mathematician? What am I doing and what do I need to learn and how can I change that?
Well, and what is really, really fun is being able to read.
Yes.
It is so fun.
Yes. Yes.
What you're bringing up, though, I think is really the most important thing. And I am beginning to focus a lot of my effort toward colleges of education. Mm-hmm. Because the reason that the administrators stick so strongly to balanced literacy, to making a fun environment and allowing kids, to guess and 3Qing, and they don't teach decoding, is because that's what they are being taught. Mm-hmm. Not in all. We have amazing, Mount St. Joseph, Walsh. We've got some, and all over the country, they're starting to pop up. But the majority of colleges of education are still delinquent, and I'll say it, in their duties. That is the one stakeholder in this whole thing that should be keeping up with current science. And they are failing, and they are not just failing our children. They are failing the teachers who paid good money, and they are failing the country because this bill is coming due. only a third of kids are proficient readers. Good God, how are we going to compete with China?
Right. It starts at the university. It
It does.
100% does. I mean, that's my story. It started at the university. I met Lucy Calkins in a book at UGA. And then I met some of her, comrades. Nancy Atwell was a name. Stephanie Harvey. These are some other names. Ralph Fletcher, Stephanie Wood-Ray. I mean, these are the OGs of the balanced literacy world. Yeah, I met them all, and those books. I still have those books. I pulled those out when I was talking to Emily, and I said, "Look, these are my books. This is what taught me," and then it continued to teach me throughout my entire experience teaching, and my district continued that. I will say this too, and this is key. I think that what happens at the university level is so key. That's going to help us create a new generation of teachers who walk into schools, who understand this, and will hopefully advocate alongside of us. That's what I'm hoping. I'm looking forward to they believe this so much like I did about balanced literacy, that they walk in and they just stick into their guns. I was kind of a thorn in some of the teachers' sides when I was a new teacher, because I joined the team of about 9 seasoned teachers who I've since apologized to profusely. But I thought I knew it all because I was this balanced literacy little new child on the scene, and I was doing all these crazy things, and they were like, tisk, 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 But honestly, it's because they weren't wrong. And I was young and naive, and I was also trained, maybe brainwashed. But I'm hoping that we will get a new generation of teachers who will come in and they'll be like me, but for the right reasons. And they'll influence some of the teachers that are still hesitant or that are having a hard time understanding why I need to move forward. But I also think we've got to keep talking about implementation. I talk about this all the time. This is so important. I moved about 3 years ago, and when I was moving, I found a notebook of a PD I took. We had to take PDs to keep our certifications up to date. And there's a wonderful lady here in Georgia who I now just love. Her name is Brenda Fitzgerald. And she's been teaching people how to teach structured literacy her entire life. She's just the little engine that could. And I was fortunate at some point in my career to take a PD from her. I took several. It was a whole course. I found this and I opened up this notebook. I was just in the middle of summer packing, just, about to pull my hair out. And I just start crying because I'm flipping pages. And I had made note cards for the 44 phonemes. I had written structured literacy. I had written decoding. I had written dyslexia. I had gotten a little bit, not comprehensive, but at least 5 days of training in structured literacy. That PD died in a notebook because when I went back to my school, there was no one doing it, no one to coach me, no resources. And although it was very intriguing to me, I wrote copious amounts of notes. It didn't have anywhere to flourish and grow. And I didn't have the support I needed to do that. And so being young and knowing what I did know, which is also key, a lot of teachers know what they know. So when there's something new and it's not supported well, it's really easy to go back to what you know, which is exactly what I did. I put the notebook in a binder, put it in the cabinet, got my PD credit, and I moved on with life. And I thought, I cannot believe this. I had access. This could have helped my kid, could have helped my classrooms, but there was no one to help me. So we've got to attack both. We've got to hit it from the side of the university level because we want to create a new generation of teachers who understand this why and the what. But then we've also got to go back and we've got to pull these schools and these districts that are just so entrenched in balanced literacy. This is happening in my county right now. We are moving toward structured literacy. We have been for several years now. But the implementation, it's it's messy. I don't have a lot of patience for the mess. I don't have a lot of patience for the speed at which we're going. I know that, listen, I do believe we've got to do things well. But I say it like this. In dyslexia, there's this phrase when you're getting intervention, we're going to go as fast as we can, but as slow as we need to. I think that's true for this. Let's go as fast as we can. So there's some things that shouldn't take forever. right? Screening kids, just start screening them. Come on, let's screen them. That's easy. And it just shouldn't be expensive and it shouldn't take a lot of money. Just screen them, right? And then let's get some good PD in there on how to teach, a structured literacy approach to foundational skills. That's not that hard. Give me a scope and sequence, tell me the sounds, teach me how to teach it, give me a few tools in my bucket. Let's get it going. We can do some things quickly. Now, as slow as we need to, okay, teachers need the why. They need to know why I need this. They need to know I needed that as a teacher. Why do I need to move to structural literacy? Why is that so important? That's where the research comes in, right? And that's like getting your college classes inside of a system that's you've been in for a while. So we have to pull them forward. I just spoke to a teacher yesterday. I was getting ready to speak at a board meeting, and I reached out to all my insiders, and I said, okay, tell me what's going on the ground floor. What's going well, what's not going well, what can I put in my speech? What do you need me to advocate for? And one of the girls said, some of us who are believing this, we're doing really well, but there's too many people who still don't believe in it. They don't know their why. So they're still doing guided reading because they don't know how to teach reading without using levels. We've adopted a $42 million knowledge building curriculum. We've trained teachers in Orton Gillingham. We have some letters sprinkled in there and a couple other things. And we have people who are reverting to guided reading levels. They don't know why this is important, and the training is not ongoing. So we've got to handle the implementation better, because that's where we can get in a really tough situation where we could real easily slip back to bad habits, because it's what we're comfortable with, and it's human nature to go to where you're comfortable. I know how to do this. I know that I think this works, or I don't know if it works, but at least I know how to do it. We've got to prevent it from both sides.
Absolutely. Now, the way that we were able to do it, but we were actually a test site for reading recovery. So we were so entrenched, it was shocking. So we formed a parent group. We did all of those things that you're supposed to do. We asked, we went up and down the line all the way to the school board. The superintendent wouldn't meet with us, begged and pleaded. And then we had to also become litigious and exercise our IDEA rights. But we found that a parent group can play a really critical role in kind of bird dogging this. And how were you able to get change? Did you guys form a parent group?
Yes. In fact, this is such a funny thing. It was accidental, to be quite honest. Maybe not accidental, maybe it was meant to be. But in 2019, there was a board meeting that I happened to be watching. I didn't always watch them. I don't know why I watched this particular one, but our instructional superintendent got up and gave a presentation on the literacy offerings that we had in the county. And I can show you this slide later, but it is a slide that it's like a buffet of everything you could possibly do in literacy. But what was intriguing to me is at the bottom, it said we had Orton Gillingham since 2017. My child was in special ed for dyslexia, and I'm paying for private OG, and supposedly there's OG in the county. Unbeknown to me, there were several other moms watching that night who also found this intriguing because their children also had dyslexia. So we all independently emailed a letter with various comments about the presentation and requested to meet. Because so many of us requested to meet, I feel bad for him. This poor, he's a really nice guy, but my gosh, the straw man. He was put out there by the literacy coordinators to give this presentation, and he didn't really know what he was talking about. I know, bless his little heart. And that's a Southern saying for, but bless his little heart. He meets with us mamas who were just all, we're like, what? We're just asking these very, very direct, clarifying questions. He doesn't know how to answer us. We've already learned a lot about structural literacy, so we're giving him alternatives. And he thanks us for meeting. There was one literacy coordinator in the meeting, and she told us that, some 50th cousin of hers had dyslexia, those people, they want to connect, so they tell you. So, but we all were private messaging each other in the Zoom call and getting each other's phone numbers and emails. So that was I call that the first unofficial meeting of Gwinnett Advocates for Dyslexia. That was our first meeting. We didn't know it, but those are the core group members. And what we started doing was meeting and discussing. We formed a private group where we just invited people as we met them. We wanted to be a safe space for people to come in and share what they were seeing. We also wanted to make sure that we could kind of have a place where we could share information ahead of district leaders. So it was like our private little, the insider knowledge place. It also became a place where we could help parents who were new to the scene, who didn't know what was going on, who, to try to help prevent them from wasting time to get their kid the assistance they needed. And so we started the group. We started speaking at board meetings. One of my favorite meetings was several of us went. We had T-shirts. It was during the pandemic, so we had to wear masks. We put masks on that said, "Teach my kid to read." We had them personalized. Somebody had, some special machine or something. And so we wore T-shirts, we wore masks, we gave our speeches. We all got together and we coordinated so that our speeches would piggyback off each other. So instead of getting 3 minutes, we got, 21 minutes. Yes, so it was really kind of nice. And we would send emails. I started sending these Monday updates where we're like all the happenings going on in literacy across the world. So if a state banned 3Qing, I shared that with the board and the district leaders. If a state was passing a law for early literacy interventions that were around structured literacy, if new resources or new findings, like when Matt Burns, talked about the BAS being as effective as flipping a coin. When that research finally came out, I shared the research and I just started sharing. I would get replies. Clay, the instructional superintendent, would respond to me, and he met with me several times. My favorite call with him was he called and he asked me. He had obviously had a chat with a lot of his coordinators. And he had all the myths, like, well, I heard that this is a boring way to teach. So I dispelled that. I heard that kids don't get to read ever. I said, well, what do you think kids that can't read are doing in that 30 to 40 minutes while their teachers are having guided reading? I never thought about that. I bet you hadn't. Those kids end up having behaviors that teachers often don't like, that teachers often put on a negative spin for those kids, and they start getting labeled behavior problems when really they just are having struggles learning to read, and we're not meeting their needs. So they're doing what any kid would do, is they're filling empty space. That's what they do best. That's what kids do. You put them put kids in a big room in 10 minutes with no order, no structure. They'll fill it up with loudness and laughter and playing and goofing off and whatever. That's what they're doing. So I just dispelled. He said, it's all worksheets. I've never seen a worksheet used with my kid. In fact, most of it's done orally. And so I just kept dispelling it. It's supposed to be like an hour-long call. It ended up being like a 3-hour call with this poor guy. I bet he's thinking, I can't win here, And we just kept pushing. That eventually led we got this was the best day ever. I'll never forget this. We're watching the business meeting. We have a business meeting, then a board meeting. So I'm watching the business meeting online because we're not typically allowed to go to those meetings, but they will post them. So I'm watching it live. And Clay, the superintendent of instruction, is about to give an update on a pilot for more structured literacy that I was like about to lose it about. And he eventually, but as he's about to speak, this lady sitting beside him pulls the mic over. And she says, we will not be giving an update because we're not going to proceed with this pilot or this product. We're going to do some more investigation around the science of reading and try to pilot some programs that are more closely aligned with that. So would you please give us some extra time to explore that? So I have already made some inways with a couple of board members, and I'm texting my in, yes. I don't know who this lady is. Well, I'm looking her up online. She came from a district in Tennessee that had led Hamilton County to proficiency in math and reading during the pandemic. And I thought, this is our our savior's here, right? She's here. So I made a point of getting to know her. I eventually got selected to join our Literacy Advisory Council for Gwinnett County. And she piloted 2 knowledge building curriculums, got us going on the trainings. In fact, before even that started, though, this was the best day. we kept pushing and pushing. So we asked for a meeting. So I brought a couple girls from the Gwinnett Advocates, and I brought our state leader from Dakota Dyslexia, Georgia, just to have her years of experience with us. And she's like a walking encyclopedia of knowledge and facts. But so we're in this meeting, and they have seven members from the district. We've got everybody from like the deputy superintendent to the instructional superintendent, the MTSS coordinator, the special ed director, the literacy coordinators for elementary and secondary. They're all in the room. We're at this meeting, and they let us talk first. So we told them what our concerns were, and we had a plan. The plan was to train everybody in structured literacy and to adopt resources to align with those, to get rid of the 15 resources we currently had and stream it down to just a few and get some intensive ones for your special education, and then we're good to go. And it was so cool because they had an agenda that they were sharing with us at the end that they had not even shared with their teachers and staff yet, which was very much aligned with what we had just asked for. And it was like, we did it. We all hugged. I will say this was kind of a cool day for me because some of the district leaders that had been there when Matthew was in the system, they apologized. And they said they were going to do better for all the Matthews. And that was just like this moment of, like, I can't believe we're here. So that was a great high moment. But advocacy is highs and lows. We lost this amazing leader because school systems are political and do dumb things. And so we lost her. And we don't have such strong leaders now. So as we've rolled out the training and our knowledge building curriculum, it's been a little rough. But I will say this, I did request a meeting. So when our new superintendent came to our county about 4 years ago, he tweeted something about this literacy classroom online, and he was bragging about it. So I wrote, well, it looks like a wonderful classroom, and I'm sure it's a great teacher, but she's using a method of instruction that is very harmful for children. And I'd love to chat with you about it. Well, he had his secretary reach out to me, so I landed in his office for about a 2-hour meeting, which is hard to come by. And I shared my story as a teacher, as a parent, and now as an advocate. And he listened. It was really kind of a powerful moment. But it had been a minute. So last year I requested a follow-up meeting because I kind of had a state of the literacy, a conversation I wanted to have. And he tried to push me off to some of his, people. And I said, no, I want to talk to you because you're the one that's in charge. And from you, all this flows. This is where the buck stops. You may hire people to carry out your plans, but you need to know this. You need to have the vision for it and the one that's pushing them to stay the course. And right now I have some concerns. So I went in and shared my concerns. And my biggest concern was that we still had reading recovery. I couldn't understand it. I said, so let me get this straight. In kindergarten, a kid's going to get beautiful structured literacy. We were piloting Wit and Wisdom and EL at this time. So Wit and Wisdom had, I love the geodes and the really great foundational skills that go with that. So I was like, so a kid is going to get, handwriting instruction that's structured, writing instruction, reading instruction, all of it's going to be structural literacy. And if they don't become proficient, we're then next year going to put them in reading recovery, which is the complete opposite of structural literacy, and we're going to see if guessing is going to solve the problem. And who's going to tell the parents that they drew the short straw, that their kid drew the short straw, so for 20 weeks, they're going to get a very confusing, different way of instruction than they've exposed to for their entire school experience. And then when they finish that, they're going to be dumped back into a structural literacy classroom that's also going to be confusing. So who's going to tell the parents that these two methods don't match, and also that this method has been proven to be harmful to kids? And that if I were them, I would pursue my parental rights for someone putting my child in a program that we know hurts children. And they're like, well, we're trying to get some of them training and, see if they can become interventionists. And I was like, that's great. But if you've been a reading recovery teacher for 20 years in this county, it's going to be real hard with like a 3-day Orton Gillingham training to switch your methods and to really embrace this. So I found out, at the end of last year that they had made the decision to stop using reading recovery. So we do not have reading recovery this year in Gwinnett County. And so I also heard too this, I don't have the facts completely validated, but I do know that some of the reading recovery teachers did go on to get training through letters, which was really, that's something I would approve of, which is because I think it's a pretty intensive approach to really switching your mindset. That's important. That mindset has to change. And some of them just chose to not continue with their jobs, which that's okay. If you can't do it and you're committed to the other way, thank you for doing the best thing for yourself and for kids. Really appreciate that. And then those of you who are being brave to kind of have a little humble pie and, know better, do better, I promise you, when you see a kid really learn to read and you compare it to what you were seeing in reading recovery, we have a teacher in Marietta City Schools, which is like our North Star district here in Georgia. I brag about them all the time. And when we were advocating at the state level for state laws around literacy, we gathered quotes from teachers around the state who have gotten training and, to give to our legislators for why they should support this bill. And one of those teachers, I love this, she said, and I can say her name because she would love it. Allison said, if I have to go back to teaching balanced literacy, I'd rather just quit. She said, because I can't go back. What I see now, there's no comparison. And my kids are successful. And I just talked to her at the beginning of this year at a meeting. And she said for the first time in her career, and she's a veteran teacher, first time in her career, every kid that came into her first grade class was first grade ready. They knew their skills. Y'all, what? that right there, that deserves a Georgia y'all. Like that right there is, goodness, why would you want to go back? Tell me another teacher in a balanced literacy classroom that's ever had a full group of kids come ready to learn that year's content with all the skills they need prior to be successful. I've never experienced that ever one day in my life. And I know I didn't exit kids that were ready for the next year too. So to have them walk in ready, that's what we want. We want them. So yeah, anyway, I probably rambled too much there.
Make sure that you amplify her story, because that's the kind of success that we want to get out there. And that's incredible.
It's amazing. We do also, I was going to tell you really quick too, in Georgia, we do have a college, Georgia College, that is training teachers in the science of reading. And they've partnered with one of my friends' nonprofit, a group that she's part of. It's not her nonprofit, but it's a nonprofit that's mission is to train teachers in the science of reading. So it's a group of parents that were from a district close by whose kids were failed, very similar to our stories. And their response to that was to make sure as many teachers they could were trained in the science of reading and structured literacy. And I currently am taking their course just as a side fun little project for myself. And what I love about it is they have taken the science of reading and made it to where it works for the classroom teacher, the regular classroom teacher with a regular load of kids. And it's a 60-hour course, and they have partnered with Georgia College to train current teachers around the same. So these teachers will be exiting the program ready to teach in Georgia schools. And it's a great partnership with a nonprofit. So the power of, and those were all parents of kids who were failed in their public schools and didn't get what they needed. And now they're taking back and they're building strong colleges and strong future classrooms through their efforts. So it's amazing. The organization is REAP. I'll give them a shout out because they are just truly amazing. And, but those are things that can be replicated. That doesn't just have to be a Georgia thing. That can be anyone can do these things.
We will put a link to that in our show notes.
Great.
And this is a podcast primarily for parents. We let everybody, listen, but we really want to focus on the parent here. So we usually end with, do you have any special advice for parents? Is there anything you want to leave with our parents?
Yeah, well, first thing is, parents, if you're in the trenches right now, trust your gut, fight for your kid. Save your kid first. They need you. This is a hard journey. And even after they get remediation, it will be still hard because they have dyslexia, and it's not just a reading issue. It affects a lot of their day and a lot of their processing. So get your kid the help they need. Reach out to people in your community who've gone before you like I did. There's some amazing people who are your guides and who will take you. I call them the underground network for dyslexia. It's just a little group of parents. But also learn from your journey and help the next person behind you. Yeah, I don't believe accidents happen. And so although I didn't choose this journey, it's the path I was put on. It's the path my kid was put on, and I'm going to use it for good. So I challenge you to find some good, whether it be showing up to board meetings, writing emails, going to the state, talking to your legislators, maybe joining a nonprofit group, whatever
Starting
it is.
a parent group.
Start a
And
parent
we
group.
will coach them. Parents for Reading Justice will coach you through the whole process. That's what we do.
Yes, yes. So just put your energy into something that will further the cause. My goal and what I do, and I'm sure this is similar to yours, I won't speak for you, but I want to help parents and kids earlier because I want to prevent the school-based trauma and all the other comorbidities that come alongside of dyslexia. Let's just keep it to dyslexia, right? Dyslexia is not a bad word, and so let's keep it there. If we intervene early and we get parents the knowledge they need early, then their kids can be on the path to success so much earlier, and they don't have to, gather up a lot of baggage that comes from the failures that schools often put our kids in the mix of.
Very wise words. Thank you. Thank you so much, Missy.
Thank you.
Literacy Now is a podcast designed specifically for parents in our effort to ensure every child learns to read. Parents deserve a seat at the table, and we bring their voices to the fore. We invite you to join the Parents for Reading Justice community on all of our socials, and make sure to visit our website to watch our documentary and to take our masterclass. All of our content is free of charge because every child deserves to learn to read. This episode was brought to you by parentsforreadingjustice.org, produced by Brett Tingley and Keita Mascaro.